Hello guys, Jonathan back again. Another huge gun that is practically obscuring me. I have to kind of sit up to make sure that you can see me over it. This is the Accuracy International AS50. Now, the impetus for this particular choice to show you today came from one of our expert reacts videos that we do with the GameSpot channel. They asked me to review the guns of Modern Warfare 3, so if you're interested in that kind of thing, head over there and check that out. And I guess a somewhat iconic weapon from that game, and from I think 6 or 7 other games, but it's not super common, is this thing. However, the version that appears in all of those games is the earlier version of the AS50. The dead giveaway, just to sort of cut to the chase on how you identify them, is the big rail system on the front here. So this is a key mod type attachment system for bits of Picatinny accessory rail. There's a long strip here, a long strip on the top, and a shorter strip on my side. The whole idea is you can move those around wherever you like. Now the first version of the AS50 came out in 2005, had the same system, but it was much shorter. It stopped a lot shorter on the barrel. You could see a lot more of this really big, heavy barrel. And a bit more, I guess, of how this works with this gas tube on the top. I'm going to show you that in a bit because this is quite a simple, and quite a, not unique, but a very rare operating system. We do occasionally get a bit technical on this channel, so that's what we'll do. Disclaimer for precision shooters amongst you, this scope is only on here for show. Just to sort of complete the look. This is actually a former MOD trials rifle that we're very lucky to have had transferred to us. And when we receive trials weapons, things that are useful for other work will generally be retained, quite rightly. So we lost the very nice, I don't know if it was a Night Force or some other optic that was, or Swarovski or something, that was taken off it. So we just put this on here so it looks like a long-range rifle. They don't look right if they don't have a scope on them. So kind of ignore this because it's not that representative. Often when these things are sold, well, if they're sold, they might be sold without any optic because if it's a civilian shooter, they will buy their own anyway, so they're not included. If they're bought at scale for militaries or police or whoever, depending on what it is, they will come as a package, a complete specification with a spec'd out optic and accessories and case and all of that. Well, this came to us just the gun and the mag. So what is this? Well, it is an anti-materiel rifle. In fact, as far as I can tell, AS stands for anti-materiel semi-automatic because, as you can tell from the lack of a big bolt handle on the side, this is in fact semi-automatic or self-loading. Same concept as the Barrett M82, the famous M82A1, the M107, that family. And that's really what this is in terms of its niche. It's a British answer to the American Barrett. So apparently this was actually developed for the Naval Special Warfare Center at Crane in the United States, implied therefore that it would have ended up with Navy SEALs, perhaps other special operations forces. I have no information on whether it did or not, but I have not seen one in service. Neither the original 2005 version or this version with the long rail system and actually redesigned receiver. If you look at it in detail, the two side by side, if we had the other type, but look at photos, all the machining, all the angles on it are different. So it's almost a bit like the original generation Harrier jet versus the American and BAE redesign of it. So not very helpful if you don't know aircraft, but same basic concept, redesigned from the ground up in every minor detail with a very similar looking result. And a gun example would be the SMLE versus the number 4, for example. This looks a bit closer to its father, as it were, but hopefully you get the analogy. So at the time that this was being marketed, Accuracy International claimed a rate of accurate fire, I don't know at what range, 5 rounds in 1.6 seconds. And that's really the idea of something like this. Anti-materiel rifles for taking out vehicles, stationary aircraft, radar, fuel tanks, you name it. The great advantage of a semi-automatic version is that you can well, depending on recoil, put a series of shots in roughly the same place and cause way more damage to the enemy's materiel than, in theory, you could do with a bolt action. Hence why the Barrett was and is so popular today. You will see online that this is made of titanium in large part, or even in part. It's not. Only the muzzle brake, this great big brake on the end. For those of you not familiar, high pressure muzzle gases are directed backward to pull the gun forward away from the rearward impulse of recoil, if that makes sense. And when they're good, when they're big and have either lots of chambers or two really big chambers, if you look at tank gun barrels, for a long time they were added for the same reason, recoil mitigation. Absolutely essential, either that or a very large suppressor, which do exist, absolutely essential for weapons like this, because otherwise the recoil will make it unusable. You definitely won't get all your shots onto the same target, and you might even hurt your shoulder quite severely if you're firing in the prone position, which you typically will be. So everything else is machined aluminium, machined steel, this little top cover here, take that off in a minute, that's stamped steel, and of course a polymer grip frame. This grip here is obviously polymer as well. Rubber butt plate. We've got a Harris bipod at the front here, adjustable, the legs extend and swivel, and there's a tilt adjustment on it. Pretty standard sort of high-end precision rifle stuff. What is permanently attached to the gun in terms of aim stability aids, if you like, aiming stability aids, is this rear monopod. So this is it in its sort of deployed position. It does turn to the side and fold up for carriage. And there is a push button, flick down, extending monopod that's adjustable to different degrees as well. This one's been through the walls a bit in trials, and so it slips. So this thing also folds up, a little bit awkward, but turn it and pull down and it folds flat, so it makes it a bit more compact for carrying around. A couple more controls to cover before we take this apart. So obviously trigger, magazine release, obvious stuff, as is the safety, so fire and safe. This little widget the use of that will become apparent when I take it apart. And this lever is a bolt hold open. So just to demonstrate that, pull that back, pull up, and you can hold the bolt open. And just for the avoidance of doubt, yes, it does work without the magazine on. Quite similar actually to the SA80 system for holding the bolt open. I don't know if that's deliberate or not, bearing in mind that AI are a British company. So we can release the bolt with that lever as well as just pull it back. I think that's about everything. So we'll take this apart. I'm going to whip the scope off because it gets in the way. All right, so magazine's off. We've checked it clear. We have a great big takedown pin here, which is a big dish-shaped thing. So we put it on its back, push that through from this side, pull it all the way out. Now, quirk of this system, we have to slide the safety to safe before we can take off the rear assembly. So an aluminium, I assume it's a forging, it's machined in any case, and it has an absolutely enormous buffer plunger piston for obvious reasons. So that's one of the more important assemblies. Now, an advertised feature of this is the ability to take it down to an extent for easy transport, and by that they mainly mean taking off the butt assembly. So the next step, we have this sheet metal top cover here, and with a suitable tool, we press in through this little window, and off comes the cover. It is just a dust cover. That will allow us to withdraw our bolt. Now, when I do that, you get your first hint of how this thing works. So, pull this to the rear. You see that enormous great tube sticking back into the into the gun there, and how far that must go into the bolt. Hopefully you can see that. Well, that's the back end of this same tube, the very front of which is here in this gas block. So it runs all the way through, and it has a little, some quite precisely machined, or a quite precisely machined end on it that act as piston rings. Because yes, this is in fact direct impingement, and I was going to do the scare quotes, but they're only necessary for the AR-10, AR-15, because that uses an internal piston in the bolt. There's a whole argument about it. Regardless of that, this is a true direct gas impingement system. The gas comes from the barrel, down this tube, straight into this bolt, or bolt carrier, I should say. The gas doesn't go into the bolt itself. So that gives us this very FN FAL, or L1A1 SLR, bolt carrier group. Big difference, of course, with the hole in the front to receive the gas tube that I showed you, and therefore to inject high pressure gas directly into the bolt carrier, forcing the thing to the rear. But the way this bolt and bolt carrier go together is absolutely classic FAL tilting bolt. So it's in this position, unlocked with the bolt forward. It comes forward, the bolt is pushed to the rear, which forces it downwards, and that's it locked in place, ready to bear all that pressure from that 50 round. Really, really powerful. Now you can see the hole in here in the bolt carrier where the gas impinges. That drives the carrier back, and then at a certain point in the receiver, the bolt is free to tilt and unlock. So it's a giant FAL with a sort of pseudo AR-15 gas system. It's actually closer to something like the Youngman rifle, which is also a true direct impingement system. So a very interesting feature for me was this lever here. Now the whole point of this, when you take off this rear assembly, this little, it's not a lever, it's a sliding catch. This comes into play and means that you cannot take this off safe, which means there's no chance of this thing firing out of battery, as they say, because if it did, this bolt's going to come back under tremendous pressure and blow the gun up, potentially hurt you quite badly. So there's a built-in safety system for disassembly, which means you can't disassemble it unless it's on safe, and then as soon as you do that, this little catch goes, nope, you are not putting this on fire. You cannot possibly pull the trigger and allow the hammer here to drop onto the bolt carrier group and fire the weapon. Really very clever and essential, really, as a safety feature. Okay, we're nearly there. One last step. I have pre-pushed out this retaining pin here, pretty hefty. Pull that all the way out, and then we should be able to remove the trigger group. So I'll quickly show you that. It's fairly straightforward. Whacking great hammer spring in there with a guide rod that sticks out the back. And it's just a semi-automatic trigger, so there's nothing too in-depth about it. Now, due to this safety system, you'd have to manually slide. You have to manually push this slide catch out of the way and slide the safety back to fire. You can then, should you need to, release the hammer. Hopefully see how that works. Pretty straightforward. Lots of lightening cuts there, lots of metal removed to help try and keep this light. All up though, it is 28.8 pounds, something like that. It's pretty hefty, but considering the job it does, not that hefty. Obviously a quality optical sight will add another however many grams to that. Mixing my units of measurement. And that just leaves us with the barreled action, which you would leave as is for cleaning or whatever. Now there's going to be a fair amount of carbon build-up inside the bolt carrier. No such thing as a free lunch. The dirt's going to go somewhere, but you know they manage just fine with the AR-15, so I'm sure that's not really a problem for this. So that's the AS50, or rather the, what you might call the AS50 Mark II. Now that's not its formal name, so please don't go around putting that on Wikipedia, as some very nice people did when I decided to confirm on camera that this was direct infringement. Someone ran straight off to Wikipedia and changed it, and used us as the citation, which amused me and pleased me greatly. But please don't go and edit Wikipedia and call this a Mark II. It's not. There's no formal change. This was always the AS50 from 2005 all the way through to 2012, I believe, is when it ceased production. So didn't seemingly find its niche. A very interesting design, very well made, as everything from Accuracy International is. Their 50 caliber range is still going, the AW50 and the AX50. Very fortunate recently to shoot an AW50 with an enormous suppressor on it, and that was really quite an experience. You can suppress a 50 caliber rifle. The recoil is significant, but it is slow. But I'm not a precision shooter, I'm not a sniper, and I'm certainly not a user of an anti-materiel rifle. But this is a gun that has quite the afterlife, as it were, already in video games. I suspect it will continue to do so, depending on the period the game is set in, of course, but it's just a visually distinctive design. I hope to see this second pattern, as I'll now call it, appearing in games in the future. They don't crop up in the movies so much, because how would you get hold of one? It's a lot easier to model one in a game. Not that it's easy, not sort of belittling the amount of time and effort taken to realistically represent a gun in a game, but yeah, for a movie, you need the real thing. Okay, that's the guns out of the way. Thank you very much for watching, as always. We have our usual social media channels to check out, our 3 museum sites. Hopefully you know all that by now. What's in front of me here is a little bit of a moonlight for me, I suppose, but I have in my time been an edge weapons person as well. Edge weapons people amongst you will recognise this as probably as an Oakshot Type 14. It's a 13th century design, very broad but quite thin blade. I've always liked them. And this is actually from our new range of reproduction swords from our own collection, which is really exciting. So we've worked with Windlass, the sword company, and with Matt Easton over at Scholar Gladiatoria. Hi, Matt. To produce a range of, I believe, half a dozen really nice replicas, or reproductions, if you will, from our collection. So this is a reproduction of Class 9 2141, found in a peat bog, and it's really very good, I think. And I hope you think too. So quite a broad range over the sort of medieval period in this range of swords. Go and check them out on our shop website. One little detail on this you might like to see. So on the blade is the sort of motto or inscription, Toto. It's on both sides twice. And on the original, that's a little bit indistinct. So we're not quite sure if it's Ioto or Toto, and I'm not enough of an expert on swords to tell you what that might mean. Answers in the comments or from my colleagues when they see this and roll their eyes at me. So check out that range. I'm quite excited about it, and I'll have to try very hard to resist to not get one for myself.